Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always here, I'm your host, Calvin Glen Alexander, and tonight I am joined by Coach JC here to learn all about the NIL information, basically, and all the Cowboy fans here kind of learn more about, hey, you know what? Here's how the NIL works for Oklahoma State. Here's why it works this way, and what can we do as fans to really try to have a better NIL outcome and get guys like Kate Cunningham and other 5-star guys in basketball and other, kind of upper level guys as well in football here to join the roster. So a little bit about Coach JC here as I introduce him. He's a professional golfer and a speaker and author. He's founder of Raising Brands U, and he's a specialist here in NIL education and entrepreneur training. So JC, thanks so much for joining.
Hey, Calvin, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, well, we're kind of hop into it here. What led you down the path of wanting to learn more about the NIL and how it works here?
So I'm a student athlete myself. I played 3 sports back in New York City all through high school. I didn't attend college. I became an entrepreneur before that. But injury plagued my career there and in professional golf. And around 2020, during the pandemic, I had realized that the NIL laws were going to come. I was kind of guessing, but I was right. So now it looks good. But 2021 came, and when the laws did come around, I thought what was going to be needed was entrepreneur training so that student athletes could actually become confident and competent going into NIL, so that you're not reliant on an agent or somebody you hired or having to hire your cousin and hoping for the best, right? Like, we want to make sure that the athletes have education and training and access to it. So I've been building this platform out for 3 years. We're ready to launch it at the end of this year, beginning of next school year. We've done our testing. We've seen, some good results. And, actually our oldest in this house is going to be attending OSU this year. So I'm getting a little deeper into the NIL there. I'm going to speak to your audience a lot tonight from a general standpoint of NIL, but I have looked into what the university is doing, and I'm going to give my opinions on how I think we can do better, because as we all saw this past football season, we definitely need to.
Yeah, definitely need to for sure. And one of the first things if we want to reach out to somebody, especially somebody who knows more about NIL, is really on the football and basketball kind of production side of it, right? Like basketball for 10 or so years, it's just not been the most fruitful experience for basketball fans, really watching just teams either develop or just really high profile guys, just real quick outs in the tourney, or some just lower than expectations. And on the football side of it, you just brought up, right? Like NIL starts up, Gundy's not really on board from the get-go, gets on board a little bit later. And then are we behind the 8 ball? How far are we behind? Why are other schools just seemingly, being able to get guys in the door like BYU or Texas Tech or whoever, that I would not think would be competing with in the NIL world just off the bat. So what am I missing there as well too? So I want to, of course, bring you on here. And the first question I really have is, like, do you see OSU doing anything differently than other schools when it comes to NIL, either how they're promoting it or how they structure it overall to athletes or anything like that?
The biggest thing that stood out to me right away was spending. At least from what I read, 3 different sources say 2.7 million is the number I hear repeated in the football program. Unless that's times 6, then it's not competitive. 15 to 30 million is going to get you the draw you want. And I think it's partially we're not at the realization yet that we're going to pay an athlete 3 times a coach. I think that's cultural, right? There are schools that have already decided we're going to pay $15 million, $22 million with the revenue sharing coming up. $22 million. Is each school going to fill that bucket? Probably not. But the fact that they're available to pay directly at $22 million now, you're going to find that the schools that do will bubble right up to the top. And the schools that, like you said, with Coach Gundy coming in late, any school that adapts late will just come in later. I don't feel like this is going to be something that ever excludes any school. I just feel like some schools are going to take longer to build their culture and realize, and this is something I'm going to use the word realize, that there are people out there who, if they heard a specific story about a specific athlete, would come in with big money. And the fact of NIL, true NIL, not pay for play, true NIL The fact of the matter is that 86% of those deals athletes are doing are because the athlete did the outbound. They went and did the research on the brand. They went and found out how they could offer a value proposition, and they did. So with that being said, if we can get smart minds that don't have to practice their sport and pass their classes to spend 8 hours a day figuring out who those people are, getting the stories to them and getting their money in so that OSU has $15 million to spend on players by next year would be the fastest fix. And I know everyone in your audience right now would be cheering that if we can make that happen.
Yeah. So what are ways that the university can provide kind of more resources for fans or for the players here to do more of that and make it a little bit easier?
I don't know if they can do more. They've created Pokes with a purpose. They've got influencer on board, brand R's on board. You got one team there already. They're providing the resources. The thing is this, let's put it in a sports analogy everybody can get with, right? Say you've got a team with low morale. Baseball team, we'll call them. We'll get off the basketball and football for a second. Say you got a baseball team with low morale, right? Who's going to sponsor that? Do people really want their business on the outfield fence of a team that's, just losing year after year after year, right? You have to change the culture in people's minds. And that's going to require players who want to do it. Okay. And I hate to cross to another university, but let's keep it in state. Us Oklahomans are okay with that. But look at OU campaigns. They've done some where the whole team is involved and they're really catchy. You see some of these TikTok videos. It's not just OU. Many universities are doing it. Even a friend of mine, Sabrina Oostberg at Belmont University, does it. She's track and field and she's kicking butt in NIL, but it's outbound. She's reaching out. So if we have players with good management, good help, and I noticed that something I read about that, I'm going to celebrate OSU here. Apparently they've got the Spears Business School students are helping the student athletes build their brands and their content, which I think is brilliant for two reasons. One, morale, and two, you can give those students the right to use the team's markings and logos and stuff to make the content more authentic without having to worry about them misusing it like a third party might. So I do celebrate those points there. I think the school is doing what they're supposed to do, but it's going to take outbound from the players themselves telling their stories, from fans coming to the school saying, hey, maybe I graduated from here and I have I have a really great story of what OSU did for my life. I became successful afterward. Let's start getting those stories out because, guys, I might be from New York and I've only been in Oklahoma for 5 years, but I can tell you there is more oil money here than is what is currently being donated to the two universities, period.
Yeah. So I guess what ways could OSU either put the students, or this is just really just on the students to put themselves forward, or just they're more like staffing need to be hired kind of for these special purposes here as the NIL goes forward? More universities are getting more money anyways. They should have more room to staff more people, in this space here to help out the athletes a little bit.
Yeah, that could work. I'm not always a big proponent of them needing a lot of people to make it work. Because what we do at Raisin Brands is we take an individual athlete at the high school level and their parents who might or might not be entrepreneurs. Okay. And we get them to learn how to do their own outbound, to learn how to tell the stories that will bring in money. And it's happening all over other sports. My sport, golf, we have kids as young as 6 years old making $1,200 a post. Okay. That's an outbound of a story. And it's something I call ROV. So for my Wall Street people, you know what ROI is, your return on your investment, right? NIL requires ROV. It requires people to look at the athlete and hope for a return on vision. Hope for a return on the vision that this athlete will become what you hope, that you will be able to support them through school, into the pros, into a career post, right? As an entrepreneur or in a sports analyst role or whatever. The schools could provide more people, sure, but what will that actually do other than take work off of the athletes? Now, we need them to know how to do some of it. I think one thing we can all agree on is that NIL is best for people who can communicate messages clearly, okay, as much as it is for an athlete that you just basically see their performance, right? There's a big difference, right? The people that we come to know household names do the best interviews, right? You're a host, you know, when an athlete does a top-notch interview, it makes an impact on the people listening, different from performance. So I try to recommend to all athletes, and I think what I'm seeing from what I'm reading about OSU is the support they've given just needs to be taken. And this is not just at OSU. I don't know if this is going to blow anybody's mind, but it's like less than 5% of all the athletes across the country are engaging in NIL.
Wow. Is there any reason why you think it's that low?
Education, mostly the brands and businesses outside of the top ones, which are doing the pay for play deals. The smaller businesses that I speak to on a general level mostly think it's still illegal for them to approach the athlete. So that's a big roadblock right there. That's why I say 86% of those deals are coming athlete outbound, right? Because the athlete gets in touch with the brand and the brand goes, we're not allowed to do that with you. And the athlete goes, oh no, on the contrary, let me send you an email showing you that not only is it legal, but my school supports it. And this is how we do it privately. And I can get rights to use the school logo if we show the campaign and we put it in writing what we're going to be doing with it. And maybe we offer a free camp for junior athletes or youth athletes to go along with it. So the school will say, hey, this is a great thing, right? Like we need more athletes as creators. And that's kind of what I'm digging into. I'm trying to teach athletes how to be influencers because they have influence. But being an influencer is different from an athlete that has influence. Does that make sense?
Totally. Is some of this, I mean, you said starting out here, I mean, much earlier than I thought. You know, you said 6 years old, right? Is like the youngest athlete that you know of that you're working with. And so
Youngest
this makes me think yeah, and well, this makes me immediately think of, you know, I've got a youngest brother who's 18 right now, going to go into, you know, college at some point here, of course, you know, in the next year. You know, he's going to graduate from high school this semester, but he's a soccer player. So the opportunities available to him, would he be transferring hopefully that NIL stuff from high school to college? Is that what some of these athletes are doing as the brands, I would assume, stay with them for, you know, a long amount of time, right? They see the vision. They're going to go in for, you know, 8, 10 years, however it may be, if they're doing all of high school and then college as well.
Right. Exactly. So for instance, oh Lord, I'm forgetting her first name, right? Mackenzie. There's a soccer player at 13 years old that Nike signed to a multi-year deal, back at the end of last year. She plays soccer out in California and, Mac Witham. That's her name. Mac Witham. So Nike signed her to this deal. And now I'm going to say this up front because it's Nike. No college is going to say, hey, your NIL deal from high school might not align with, you know, the vision of our university, right? Nobody's going to say that, but you might run into that if you take 2 car dealerships, a diner and a chicken restaurant and, you know, end up at OSU, right? You might run into that. So I've always recommended that high school athletes keep their deals within their high school term and then renegotiate when they go to college. And that's also what anybody would tell the kid, because let's be honest, when you sign that deal as a sophomore in high school, you haven't built the value that you have as a freshman in college. You want to renegotiate that deal.
Yeah, of course here. It also brings to mind here the question I have is for an OSU athlete who's a prospective athlete and worried about their brand deals and how it works out. I have a practical question for you here on Cooper Flagg. He's a New Balance athlete, signed as a New Balance guy, but of course he plays for Duke and they are a Nike school, you know, Nike Jordan athlete, but I think they're a Nike school. So how does the NIL, where of course he's got a shoe deal with one company that's not what the team plays in, is he mainly just doing that promotion off campus and the commercials, but you know, what rules can he wear New Balances, and is that something athletes should worry about whenever they're coming in prospective students?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any kind of conflict with the school, obviously you want to settle that through their NIL office immediately when arriving, or even on your initial site visit, right? Like you want to say something, hey, I'm considering this school, you know, and I have this deal. How does that affect you guys? What do you think of that? Like I've always told athletes that if you're considering a school, which I think is more important than an NIL partner, and I'll tell you why, because 30 years from now, you're not going to go, hey, my alma mater was Deco Shoes in Oklahoma. No, you're going to say where you went to school. So it's important that you choose the right school and you make them happy if that's where you want to go. So if you have a high school deal, and let's say that high school deal is in Norman, Oklahoma, and you decide to go to OSU, right? There's going to be some issues there with the things you want to say and do in your ads, right? So we always want to make sure anywhere we attend school and we promote that team, that we're aligning with brands that the school is good with, that they feel like they align with the vision at least, or that they're doing well enough for that athlete that he's able to take care of other athletes on the team as part of the deal. Schools love that. I've noticed that if you have an NIL deal and you're able to get other players involved in that deal through your own negotiations, that's the wonderful thing. And I think it also put to bed a lot of people who said things like blanket statements like all these athletes are getting greedy. Right. So I think we put that to bed with all the charity that's happened. Last I heard, and I couldn't confirm this. So guys, if I'm wrong, this will just bring more comments to the show. But I've heard that over $200 million of NIL has been donated from the players for different various sources. So I applaud athletes out there, all of you who have given back, junior camps and everything you've done pretty much to basically say that, hey, it's about time we got paid, but it wasn't just about the money. That's the right message to teach the up and coming athletes.
All right. Well, we've talked about, the athlete perspective for, pretty in depth here, but on the fan side of it here, what more could I do as an OSU fan to really try to either help out NIL wise or get transfer players or, key players on the team or whatever? I mean, it would have been great to have Deshaun Strickland stick around for another year. But also it's great that, we've got other guys coming in that are from, other big name universities like UCLA and Auburn, et cetera, that are joining the team as well. So can't be mad about guys leaving if other guys are joining other from power schools.
Yeah. And I feel like as a fan myself too, I'm unable to assist the programs the way I would like to. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm blessed. I've had some success in my life, but I am not by any means able to get us quarterback next year or a wide receiver the year after. So we're in a bad position there unless we can show our strength in numbers. Fans can do things like, recently I saw, a diner here in Oklahoma City held an event where team members from this organization came and signed stuff for people eating at the diner. The diner gave 50% of all of their profits to that little NIL folder for that team. So it was kind of like a service for service NIL deal, if you will, a true NIL deal. But if we had something like that at a higher level of donor, right? Like say, for instance, I like to mention them because from Oklahoma, Folds of Honor Foundation, right? They have Budweiser, a 7-figure donor, right? That's an organization that started small here in Owasso, Oklahoma, right? Another one can start in Stillwater and build and become something where those guys I talked about that could give, and the men and women of this state that could give 7-figure donations would come forward with that kind of money. But again, would you yourself put your hard-earned money into it without seeing the athletes pouring out their stories? Right? We're in an age now where watching the game is just on Saturday. Watching the content is every day. Everybody is scrolling the content every day. And I will say this, here's something I guess I'll say it flat out. This is what OSU could do better. I'm on 5 social media platforms, and I will tell you I'm dominated by OU and UCO sports on my feeds. Right. So there needs to be more OSU, and there should be on my feeds because we talk about it in our house. Our son's going to be going there next year. Like they should be part of our algorithm, but I'm not seeing the scroll stopping content that I see from other schools locally. I mean, UCO had a phenomenal year this past year and they took advantage of it. And they invented like 9 new Instagram pages and they got every little faction of their school excited about one good year. And I feel like that's something that, check me if I'm wrong, was it 2021 OSU was 12-2?
Yeah.
It's an exciting year, right? was an exciting year, right? July of that year, NIL became legal, right? If everybody at OSU jumped on it like everybody at LSU gymnastics did, they brought in $3 million the first day.
Yeah.
The very first day of NIL, the Livy Dunn story has been done. Even Shaquille O'Neal's movie on, forgive me, I don't watch a lot of TV, Netflix or whichever one. It's on Prime Video. Shaquille O'Neal really talks about it. I mean, they moved 7 figures into that school 24 hours after the law changed.
Wow. That's just really impressive overall.
It just takes that kind of, and you know, when you mention people, I do say people do move the machine. So maybe there's a team of people that need to come to OSU or be recruited to OSU that could really dive into an electric culture of social media, because that's how we get our stories out now. You know, yeah, the story of what we're talking about right now, this is going to go to social media, it's going to go to YouTube, it's going to go out to StreamYard, right? Like people are going to see this because of how viewership works now. I'm not going to have News 9 on or News 6 on just to see the OSU commercials. I've got to see more from them to feel like, hey, this thing's getting exciting, right? Like, look at the Thunder this year. I went to a Thunder game last year where I was able to go from Loud City to like row F because nobody was sitting there. Now, look, you got to buy the tickets on Facebook now. They're sold out.
Yeah.
That's electricity created in 1 year, correct?
Pretty much. I mean, last year they were also number 1 overall seed in the West, but you know, I mean, granted this year it's been well known before the season started, right? Everyone had time to amp up from last year to really buy in early because you just knew we were going to be that good and only better.
Right, but that was also compounded by the sheer dominant content that they put out across all the platforms. They paid to make sure you saw, you know, Shai's going to be the best basketball player in the league this year, right? And we're going to have our big guy back. And, you know, we're doing this without him. Like, they built on every little story. They built on every story. There was a whole series of Instagram videos about how we're doing this without Chet, right? Like, we're doing all this without Chet. We're doing all this without Chet. Like, they had videos where, like, he was just a silhouette, right? Like, he's missing, and we're still doing this. And people got attached to that video, that series, and that creates excitement. And, you know, in the end, NIL is a sale, right? You're trying to make a sale to businesses to bring their money in and then trying to sell an athlete on coming to your school. And I grew up in Wall Street. The definition of a sale is the transfer of enthusiasm from one human being to another. It has nothing to do with the money or the services or the goods. It's a transfer of enthusiasm. That's how we get people on board with what we're selling. Our confidence and our confidence about it makes people want to buy it. So if the athletes are out there, the social media team, the Spears Business School, and if they're doing it through, I believe, and again, guys, if I get any of this wrong, just check me on it. But I believe OSU did line with Open Doors, and they do have that platform already available for the athletes. So at least that gives the athletes an opportunity to look and see. These are all brands that are interested. Now do your outreach.
Yeah, one would hope that they would take it up on that opportunity here, if it is that easy.
The other way that I see it, Calvin, is maybe we get lucky and a couple of our top high school athletes over the next couple of years bring that excitement to OSU and are able to bring that kind of confidence and competence to a conversation to a high school senior to bring them in, or 6 of them, or 12 of them. You see what I'm saying? It could be, it doesn't have to happen just through money. It could happen through a spirit, through a person who comes to the team or the organization and just provides a spirit that people buy into. That's the other way I see it happening.
Yeah, I as an OSU fan hope that more people get on board with NIL, but I think what's more realistic is what you're saying. There has to be more of a give from just OSU as a whole. And my question earlier about hiring more staff, I mean, there's got to be more people either on staff that could transition over or just could be hired on to do more of the social media stuff here to really start sharing those players' stories, or at least help them set up, and record the video themselves or do whatever it may be. But like, I would think that all of this content that's being pushed out by the universities or by the NIL brands or, or by the athlete are pretty darn well produced. I would assume the athletes want to put themselves in a pretty darn good light. And I mean, are we also asking these athletes to go learn video production on the side too, or, social media platform production, or is that kind of stuff that you guys would help them out with as a company, or is that kind of stuff that, hey, you know what, this is kind of like a give and take. The athletes just need to share some period. It doesn't be so polished.
Yeah, there's 3 levels to that depending on the athlete and what they're receiving or being offered through NIL. There's the do it themselves way, which there are plenty of awesome people out there already, including us, that do teach that. I just want to shout one out. Samantha Green has been doing so much for student athletes all across the country. I just want to shout her out. She's on LinkedIn. You can find her there. But the 3 levels basically are they do it themselves, they do it with help, or somebody does it for them, right? So when you're talking about Shedeur Sanders, you're talking about somebody doing it for him, right? Whether it's his brand partners or in-house money or the school, right? They're basically doing it all for him. He's an appearance fee kind of deal, right? Like he shows up as the talent and does his NIL stuff. But when you're at the level of doing it with them or them doing it on their own, that's where you're running into the fact that more than 90% of the athletes aren't doing anything. Because this part right here, setting up the camera and pressing record, is just not their thing, right? And as a baseball, basketball, football player who pitched, played quarterback, played center, I don't think I would have been like, yeah, I'm going to stop being obsessive about my 3 sports and go make content, right? Now, I always say this, if it was back in the 90s, the way we used to raise money, we would just go out and ask businesses or shake a can, right? For your little league or your high school, you raise money the hard way. And nothing has changed between then and now. So if an athlete wants to figure out how to do it or just wants to get a friend and say, hey, man, look, let's try it. Film me doing these videos. And if I get paid, I'll give you X, right? Like there are those things happening, but the in the middle is tough, man. It really is. For an athlete to know how to make something good, right? That'll actually get views on social media and build their following, right? That's a difficult position if you don't have the resources, the money, or the people. It really is a difficult position. Now, our company does teach and train all those things, but they still require you to choose your level on the outside. You have to still choose, am I going to go do this myself? Am I going to spend $1,000 a month for help, $5,000 a month for help? Or am I that guy that I'm the quarterback who's going to OSU next year on a big deal and I'm going to pay everybody to do my content for me? Right? That really depends on the individual. I would say this, every athlete who wants to have the opportunity to have the best options after school and sports are over should absolutely learn how to do it themselves, then learn how to do it with a little help and make themselves enough money that they can have somebody do it for them. And I will say this clearly, golfers, track runners, Quincy Wilson on track, Miles Wilson in golf. These kids are making 7 figures from financial brands, things like that. They started making their content by themselves, right? Then they got a little help. And with a little help, they made some good content. But this is like everything in life. Every athlete that has failed because they stopped trying. That's all there is to it. Same way you got your show successful, right? You just keep doing it. That's how I got Track Talk to be viewed by people on 5 platforms, because I just keep doing it. I just keep providing free information, free NIL education, topics that people aren't talking about. Well, when NIL comes up, I ask the question, is that your cousin? That's your agent? A lot of people don't address those things with people. Do you think taxes are 50%? Because I've heard that from athletes. They're putting away 50%, thinking that's just for taxes. Now, that's great. You're putting away savings, but you understand the education and training portion there is important to getting them started, but they still have to have the gumption to take the first step.
Yeah, well, as OSU fans here, the biggest question I would have overall is what is OSU doing differently than other universities in this space here? What is K-State doing differently in the NIL perspective here to just having more NIL donations and just keeping guys on roster and stuff like that in football and in basketball. They're doing, both are land grant universities. They're in neighboring states here. There's a lot of similarities. Both have regional airports, in the city. Both cities are similar size. What is K State doing either differently or better, or just what are they doing differently here?
I didn't see specific differences to that made it look like one was doing better than the other. I think what happened there is that K-State just had more successful alumni in the core of their NIL collective. That's kind of what I see as looking at it. It looks like they came in with a much more solid group that had a much bigger Rolodex.
So they're just more bought in earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like getting more guys on board from the jump. Yeah.
Listen, Calvin, I never want to blame a coach over NIL stuff, but Gundy definitely didn't make it favorable starting out. I'll give it to you from our perspective. As an NIL university meant to onboard online and educate and train students that are at the high school and college level, but we went and offered it to OU. We didn't, because we didn't think we would be accepted at OSU. We didn't make the offer. I'm going to make the offer this year, but we did not make the offer on our initial alpha program, but we did with OU just because we felt like they were doing One Oklahoma. They were doing all these commercials. They had one of the most witty commercials I had seen them do. And it actually brought them massive amounts of NIL deals. And this is one that I think at OSU should just steal because it's a great idea. All the football players are walking off the field and somebody off camera asks, who's got the best queso in Norman, Oklahoma? And out of 30 something kids on the team, they named about 25 different places. All that school had to do from there was reach out to every place that was named in the video and say, hey, you guys want to get in on this? You see, like things like that, creativity like that. And athletes usually come up with that kind of creative stuff, believe it or not. They have, let's be honest, you've been in the dugout or on the sideline, we got a good sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair enough for sure.
Athletes always have a good sense of humor, so it's easy for them to come up with solid content. I think the school should create the environment. Let's say it that. I think that's the best way I could put it. Create an environment that electrifies the students to do it, electrifies fans to start making their own little collectives, okay? And start doing big things. And if we all remember, I don't know, again, just my New York brain, you guys remember the GameStop stuff that went on a few years ago on Wall Street? That was a small group of people made a very large dent in something, right? So I want to say to the fans of OSU sports, don't think that you and your 5 friends who are just awesome and love your school or love your alma mater can't get together somewhere and bring in 3 new people every week and start the fun together. Okay. And if you don't want to be involved in the business portion, take your pool and figure out how to give it to the collective or give it to whoever is getting you the players you want to get. Right? Like we can all do something, but if we all sit back and do what's going on right now, which is the what can you do attitude, or we're not raising that much money attitude, or, if you don't take it in an electric fashion to the people who have the money, you're never going to get it, right? And every time you don't ask is a no.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So I really do think that's the differences, because when I look at it, it looks like you've got influencer involved, Brander Group is involved, One Team is involved, Open Doors is involved. This is what all the schools are doing. If there's one thing that I could say, I do know a singular state is doing better than everybody else that Oklahoma needs to do. And you and I talked about this a little bit before the show. The state of Alabama now requires NIL agents and representatives to be registered with the state and have a specific amount of education on how to do their job. This is a big reason athletes are not engaging in NIL. So, for your audience, put yourself in these shoes for a second. You're good at your sport. You came to a good university. Your parents have been good to you. They're able to afford the school with a scholarship. All right. And you're doing the absolute best you can and brands approach you, okay, that don't align with what you want to do or aren't part of the business of the school, and you just don't know what to do, right? So yeah, say you've got a little bit of a scholarship, your parents can afford the rest, and you know you've got your school ride done. You say to yourself, what if I mess this up with this NIL deal that's just for a short term? And that becomes a mindset. And there's lots of athletes out there. Okay, this is what I was getting to. The episode of Track Talk that I had Ethan Stovall. He's a track runner from OSU. To get him on my show, the amount of stress that him and his dad went through, not knowing whether being on a piece of my content was going to mess up anything at his school whatsoever. Now, to me, I'm thinking, well, dude, you're allowed to shoot a YouTube video and say, dude, I'm off to OSU. This is awesome. I'm going but kids out there really believe that now that NIL is the way it is, that they can't even wear an OSU t-shirt and be in a video playing video games with their friends. They're like, yo, no, don't shoot that video. I got to take my shirt off. And it's like, we're really still at a point. And for me, it's mind boggling because look, I'm in a position where I've been studying NIL, reading about it, doing it, being involved for 3 years every day. But I'm talking to high school seniors and college freshmen that it's the first time they hear about it. What does it stand for? Okay. And you and I and your audience have trouble believing that because we watch ESPN, because we listen to YouTube Sports, right? So we hear a little bit about NIL all day, every day. But the people that we're actually watching on television playing those sports, you have 4 out of 5 linemen that don't know how it works at all. That they got a deal through the school, right? Hey, the whole team gets $5,500 and you're all going to appear on a video and say something nice about the school, right? Beyond that, they're looking at me like, Coach, you're telling me I can get paid for a YouTube video? And I'm like, yes. yes again. Many different ways over. You can get paid for a Facebook post and an Instagram post. So if I could give to your audience something right now, if there's student athletes listening at the high school or college level, in 1995, my baseball team asked me if I could go out and raise money so we could go on a traveling tournament. I went to every business owner or manager that my parents knew, and I said, hey, sir, would you give us $1,000? And in return, we'll put a banner out on the center field fence, right? There was almost never a no. Now here we are in a much more electric economy right now with a much more energetic feel around sports, and less people are going and doing the asking. So let's say you currently attend OSU and you absolutely love eating at a specific restaurant in town. I'd like you to go into that restaurant with your phone, start filming, start talking about how much you love it. Go to the manager and ask them if they'd be willing to give you free meals in exchange for posting on your Instagram. And I don't care if you have 200 followers, 2,000 followers. Don't let that number be what stops you or starts you. Everybody started somewhere. I monetized LinkedIn at 33 followers. Okay. Just go and talk about yourself, about the team, about the excitement, whatever it is you're doing on social media, talk about it. And get somebody to trade with you something you already spend money on, right? Your parents are probably paying for food or you're paying for food every day. Try to get it traded through NIL. Try to use your name, image, and likeness to get your food for free. All right. And if you can make that happen, you can make the Nike deal happen too.
Sure enough. Well, I think that's great words of wisdom here from Coach JC. If you're not already wanting to, make sure, we'll put all the links here below here, but at Coach JC Wins on Instagram and on TikTok. And, please go follow if you're not already. You got to follow at the CGA Tour on Twitter and Instagram, as well as YouTube as well here too, and subscribe down below. And then we'll link everything for Coach JC here down below as well here in the description. So thanks so much for joining tonight.
Oh man, thanks so much for having me. I hope we helped at least one person in your audience tonight. Your show is great, dude. I love it.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. Glad there's another cowboy from Edmond, Oklahoma, joining up to Stillwater here before too long as well. And we'll catch you guys.